Europe is facing its worst gas supply crisis ever this winter, linked to the war in Ukraine. Prices are soaring, and major economies like Germany are considering rationing.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, we gather here today at a challenging time. Russia is holding the world hostage by using energy and food as weapons. Make no mistake, while Russia is fighting only in Ukraine, Russia's hostilities are directed at the entire global community. With our reliance on fossil fuels, we have made ourselves vulnerable to autocrats' whims. So when relations between our open societies and these powers fall into crises, energy costs explode.
The oil-producing countries of the Arab world decided to use their oil as a political weapon.
We saw it in 1973, 79, 1990, and we see it today again. At the same time, it is the burning of these fossil fuels that causes the planet to warm. And we can already witness the dramatic consequences. Pakistan faces the worst flood in its history. Europe, China, and the American West emerge from severe, prolonged droughts that cause crop failure and people to starve. Just as the violent conflicts with authoritarian states, climate change is already causing human suffering and costing lives. For our futures not to be forsaken, we have to come to grips with reality. While we are too late to fully avoid climate change, we have to stop it spiraling out of control, and we have to adapt to its unavoidable consequences. Simultaneously, we would reduce our reliance on autocrats and dictators. Three things are crucial at this point. First, give investors, businesses, and households the right incentives and the right regulatory frameworks to ensure they direct their funds towards low-carbon projects. Investments in energy efficiency, renewable energies, and green innovation must be an absolute priority. Second, we must start putting the decarbonization of the more challenging, hard-to-abate sectors, such as heavy industry, shipping, aviation, into the focus. These are responsible for almost a third of global emissions and do not have an economic low-carbon alternative to fossil fuels as of today. Finally, we need to scale up adaptation finance and integrate adaptation considerations into all of our infrastructure projects globally. We must build railways, hospitals, and other infrastructure in a way that can withstand more frequent and extreme weather events. The European Investment Bank is doing its part, mobilizing over $1 trillion in this decade towards a more sustainable economy and the transition to carbon neutrality. At the EIB, we have invested heavily in clean energy for many years, and we are supporting clean tech innovation. While some might be skeptical towards a public institution supporting innovation, it was the EIB, 20 years ago, financing offshore wind at a time when commercial banks would not be willing to engage. Today, we do the same thing with floating offshore wind, battery storage, and green hydrogen. We will commit even more resources in these areas, deploying the full scale of our financial arsenal to back innovative projects that will help us deal with the challenge ahead. EIB will triple its global adaptation finance by 2025. And already today, the EIB screens all the projects it finances for the risks of climate change and ensure they are adapted to future changes. But public support, no matter how generous, won't be enough to bankroll the transition to a net zero and climate resilient future. That's why involving the private sector is crucial for making the transition a success. And last but not least, we must make sure that workers and societies can prosper in the transition to a net zero carbon economy. We must support the communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And if the transition will not be just and fair, we will fail. We will have no transition. At the end of the day, I am hopeful that Russia's attack on Ukraine, with all the suffering it has caused, all the disruption it triggered on energy, food, and raw material prices, will be a breakthrough moment in the fight against climate change.